The first thing I noticed was the smell, not perfume, not polished money, not the expensive candles burning in brass bowls by the revolving door of the St. Orlia Hotel. Crushed lilies, sharp, green, wet in the back of my throat. One of my buckets had tipped over when the security guard shoved my cart back with his shoe. And 3 white lily heads lay bruised against the black marble like something soft had been punished for entering the wrong church. I told you, the woman from events said without looking at me, vendors use the service entrance. Her lipstick was the color of old wine. Mine had worn off around noon while I was wiring roses into a suspended arrangement for a bride who called me sweetheart when she wanted a discount and ignored me when I sent the invoice. I came to the service entrance, I said, and I hated how breathless I sounded. Your man sent me here. The guard folded his hands over his belt. And I'm sending you back. My flowers are for the Conti Foundation Gala. The gala has a florist. I am the florist. The event woman finally looked at me then, slowly, starting with my shoes. Wet at the toes from a leaking flower bucket, cheap black flats from a clearance rack in Queens. Her eyes reached my face and settled there with the mild disgust of someone finding a fingerprint on crystal. You were a replacement, she said. We no longer need you. I stared at her. What? Plans changed. I looked past her shoulder to the lobby where my arrangements were already visible through the open bronze doors, my work unmistakable. The staircase wrapped in white roses and olive branches, the suspended clouds of baby's breath over the champagne tower. The altar-like central table I'd built around 7-foot delphinium lines because she'd wanted something celestial and cold. They had used my flowers, they just hadn't paid for them. I worked 3 nights on this event, I said, my voice went thin. I bought those stems on credit. The woman glanced at her watch. Then you should be more careful about the clients you trust. Something hot climbed into my face. You can't just— I can, she said. And I am. The guard nudged my overturned bucket aside with the toe of his shoe. Water fanned across marble. 2 more lilies rolled free. 1 stem snapped where it hit the wheel of my cart. It should have been the flowers that broke me. The money, maybe. The fact that the rent was due in 2 days, and my father's old shop in Little Italy was already 3 months behind, and I had told my dead father's photograph that morning not to worry. I had this one. Instead, it was the humiliation, the way they had already moved on, the way my hurt was interrupting their clean, rich evening. I knelt because my knees stopped being reliable. My hands shook when I picked up the broken lily. White pollen dusted my fingers. The stem had split on an angle. I reached into my apron pocket for the small florist knife I always carried and trimmed the break clean, even though tears were burning so badly I could hardly see the blade. A fresh cut, fresh water. Broken things still drank if you gave them a chance. That was what my father used to say. I wrapped the stem in damp tissue from my kit. My face was hot and wet, and I hated that too. Hated crying here, hated crying anywhere. Miss, the guard said, impatient now, you need to move. I heard footsteps above me, but this was a hotel full of people with hard shoes and softer morals. I didn't look up. I reached for the second lily. A shadow fell across the marble, not overhead, in front of me. The guard straightened so fast I heard the leather of his belt creak. The event woman's mouth closed. For one strange second, the whole lobby changed temperature. I looked up. He stood in a dark suit with no tie, coat open, one hand in his pocket, tall, black-haired. Not movie star pretty, worse than that, severe where he should have been handsome. His face had the kind of stillness that made other people seem over-rehearsed. There was a faint silver scar near his jaw. His eyes were the coldest thing in the room. Men moved around him without touching him. The guard dropped his gaze first. The woman from events smiled too fast. Mr. Salvetter, we were just handling a confusion. He didn't answer her. His eyes were on my hands, on the lily. On the clean cut I'd made through the crushed stem while I was still kneeling in spilled water like an idiot with mascara burning down my face. What's your name? He asked. His voice was low and almost quiet, but the guard stepped back like he'd been shoved. Sophia, I said before I could stop myself. Sophia Bellini. He kept looking at me, not at my mouth. Not at my chest, not even at the tears, which would have been bad enough, at my hands, at the flower. At this hour, he said, why are you still here? The event woman cut in. There was a billing misunderstanding. His gaze shifted to her at last. She swallowed. Did I ask you? He said. No one moved. I rose too quickly. The room tipped. I caught the side of my cart. They used my work, I said. I wasn't sure why I was telling him. Maybe because he'd asked. Maybe because everyone else in the room felt arranged and fake, and he felt terribly, dangerously real. I was told to deliver. I was told I'd be paid tonight. They let the flowers in, not me. His expression didn't change, but something in the room tightened. He looked past me at the staircase. At the suspended arrangement, back to the bruised lilies at my feet. Then he said to the guard, pick those up. The guard blinked. Sir, the flowers. The man bent instantly. I should have felt victorious. I felt sick. The event woman found her voice. Mr. Salvator, the board is waiting upstairs. They can wait. He stepped closer. I smelled something clean and cold on him, like winter air caught in wool. How much are you owed? I should have lied higher. I said the real number. He nodded once to the man behind him. Money changed hands without counting. A thick envelope. My stomach dropped again, harder this time. That kind of money didn't move around ordinary men. I took one step back. I don't want, it's yours. I don't know you. A pause. One of the men at his shoulder made the smallest sound, almost a laugh choked off before it could become a mistake. The dark-haired man looked at me as if no one in a very long time had said that to him without trembling. No, he said, you don't. Then his gaze shifted to my cart. To the box of wired centerpieces, to the false bottom tray I had not packed, his eyes sharpened. He moved before I understood he was moving, crossing the distance in 2 steps and lifting one of my compotes off the cart with one hand. He turned it, pressed his thumb beneath the moss line, and a small black object dropped loose into his palm. The room went silent in a new way, not awkward, armed. The event woman went white. I stared at the device in his hand. What is that? No one answered. The man beside him was already speaking Italian into an earpiece. Another had taken the event woman by the elbow. She made a frightened noise. I backed up. I didn't put that there. His eyes came back to mine. This time there was no distance in them at all. I know, it did not comfort me. Who are you? I whispered. The guard answered by accident, maybe because fear loosens stupid tongues. Dante. He cut himself off, but it was enough. The name hit the floor between us. Dante Salvator. I knew that name the way everyone in New York knew it, not from newspapers. Men like him didn't belong to paper, from lowered voices. From the fact that certain restaurants never closed. From the stories told by delivery drivers and bartenders and women who cleaned suites that hosted meetings with no guest list. I looked at him. Really looked, and realized every person in that lobby had been waiting for him to decide whether I was a witness, a fool, or a problem. He held my gaze for one brutal second too long. Bring her, he said. I went cold. Bring me where? His attention shifted to the crushed lily still in my hand, then back to my face. Somewhere safer, Fior. The nickname did not sound tender. It sounded like a door locking, and then the doors behind me opened and my old life closed with them. I did not scream in the car. This remains, to this day, one of the most surprising things I have ever done. Maybe because terror had gone clean and hard inside me. Maybe because the car itself was so silent it felt rude to panic in it. The leather was black. The windows were dark enough that Manhattan smeared by in streaks of reflected light. No one handcuffed me. That somehow made it worse. Across from me sat a man with a broken nose and perfect posture who didn't look at me once. Beside me sat the envelope of money I had not asked for and did not trust. In front, the driver kept muttering under his breath in a way that eventually became impossible to ignore. I said no bread, he grumbled. No bread means no bread. What is the point of language if Rosa treats it like a suggestion? The broken-nosed man sighed. Nico, I'm serious, Paolo. She says eat, you're too thin. I say I'm cutting for summer. She says summer can wait. Depression can't. Then she puts butter on everything like she's trying to bury me with flavor. I stared at the back of his head. His hair was too nice for a man driving what was very likely an abduction vehicle. He caught my gaze in the mirror and brightened. Ah, good, a witness. Tell him I'm suffering. I said nothing. That bad, huh? He asked. Understandable, first night is always the worst. My spine went rigid. First night? Paolo closed his eyes as if in prayer. The driver clicked his tongue. Not like that. Mater di Dio, I sound like a trafficking ring. I mean first night in the villa. You'll hate the pillows, they're too expensive. Your neck doesn't know how to trust them. I should not have laughed. A horrible little sound escaped me anyway. He pointed at the mirror triumphantly. You hear that? I'm a healer. Your mouth, Paolo said, is why we all drink. The gates opened onto a house that was too large to call a house and too quiet to call a home. Stone, iron. Tall cypress trees cut against the night. The kind of place built to keep weather out and secrets in. When I stepped from the car, the air smelled like wet earth and clipped hedges. Somewhere water moved in a fountain. Somewhere farther off, I heard men talking in Italian, low and fast, then stopping all at once when another door opened. Dante crossed the courtyard without hurrying. Men moved around him in a pattern I was beginning to understand. Not crowding, not guiding, adapting. He did not look at me until he was close enough that I noticed the faint roughness of stubble at his jaw and the shadowed half-moons under his eyes. You'll stay here until I know how your delivery was compromised, he said. I already told you I don't know anything about that device. And I told you I know, then let me go. No, one word. Quiet, final. I hated how much harder that landed than if he'd shouted. I lifted the envelope. Take this back. He looked at it like it bored him. It's payment. It feels like hush money. A flicker crossed his face, gone too quickly to name. Keep it, he said, you earned it. He turned to go. I heard myself say, you can't decide things for me because everyone else is afraid of you. That stopped him, not dramatically, just enough. He faced me again and the courtyard seemed to empty itself around us. Everyone else, he said, you know what I mean. He took another step closer. I stood my ground because I was poor, tired, furious, and past the point where self-preservation performed well under pressure. No, he said, tell me. My pulse was loud. You walk into a room and people stop being people. They become weather vanes, they point wherever you point. Nico, still by the car, whispered a reverent, beautiful. She's either brave or concussed. Dante's eyes stayed on mine. I should have lowered them. I didn't. Something unreadable settled deeper in his expression, like a thought choosing where to live. You'll have a room, he said. You'll have your phone after it's checked. You'll have what you need. I need my shop. His gaze dropped briefly to the envelope in my hand. The rent will be covered. I blinked. I didn't ask you to do that. No, it was somehow worse that he agreed. He nodded once toward the side entrance. Rosa, a woman in her 60s, appeared from the doorway in a flour-dusted apron and house slippers, as if she had been summoned by the idea of feeding someone rather than by her actual name. Silver hair twisted into a bun, sharp eyes, soft mouth. She took one look at me, then at my wet shoes, and said, who made her stand outside in this? Nico lifted a hand. Important note, I did not. Also, I am starving in a way that should concern the church. Rosa ignored him. She came straight to me, took my elbow, and clicked her tongue at the smear of mascara under my eyes. Kitchen, she said, then bath, then sleep. Men can invent conspiracies around breakfast. Dante didn't interfere. That, more than anything, unsettled me. The kitchen was warm enough to feel indecent after the marble chill of the hotel. Copper pots, lemon soap, bread cooling under a towel so fragrant it nearly made me cry a second time that night. Nico hovered in the doorway like a man visiting holy ground. Rosa, he said carefully, I'm only here to escort the guest. She cut a slab of focaccia and put it in my hand. Then a smaller one in his, then after a long look at his hopeful face, a third one anyway. This is sabotage, he whispered. This, Rosa said, is olive oil. He took a bite and visibly forgave God. I sat at the table because standing had begun to feel optional. My fingers closed around the bread without appetite. Rosa set tea in front of me. Chamomile, honey, my throat tightened. You don't have to be scared in my kitchen, she said. I almost told her fear had followed me in. Instead I asked, how long have you worked here? Long enough to know men with power are worst when hungry and stupidest when hurt. Nico nodded solemnly. She's our philosopher. She's your cook, Rosa said. Go away, he sighed toward the ceiling. One day she'll admit we are meant for each other. Rosa didn't even look at him. When hell freezes. See, he told me, flirting. I smiled before I could stop it. Then the kitchen door opened and Dante came in with Tommaso Riva beside him, older, broad-shouldered, gray at the temples, his suit worn like an old oath. Tommaso's gaze landed on me, not unkindly. Miss Bellini, he said, I'm Tommaso. If Mr. Salvador asks questions, answer them directly. It is safest. For who? I asked. His mouth moved, almost a smile, almost regret. For everyone. Dante stood near the island, not sitting, not looming, but somehow still taking up the room. Who had access to your arrangements after you finished them? I swallowed tea too fast. My assistant left at 4, after that only me. Anyone call you, change the delivery, offer extra cash, a beat. Too small for anyone else maybe, not for him. My fingers tightened around the cup. No, I said. Dante watched me. So did Tommaso. Rosa made a soft, disapproving sound at the tension in the room and moved between us to refill my cup as if hot water could solve organized crime. Dante's gaze slid to the trembling saucer in my hand. He could see I was lying. I knew he could, but he did not press, not then. He only said, until this is resolved, you stay where I can see you, Fior. And somehow the quiet of it was more controlling than chains. Morning in the villa began with espresso, clipped footsteps, and the sense that the walls heard everything before the people did. My room overlooked a formal garden cut into precise green geometry, all white gravel and box hedges and the dark shine of you. When I opened the curtains, 2 men below paused mid-conversation and looked up, not at me exactly but at the window, as if windows in this house could be dangerous if left unattended. By the time I came downstairs, Rosa had put coffee on a tray and Nico was standing at the kitchen island eating egg whites with the face of a condemned man. There's no joy in this, he told me. Protein is a punishment invented by men who hate their mothers. Rosa slid a plate of ricotta toast toward me. Eat. I thought you said no bread, I said to Nico. He looked wounded. I say many things in weakness. For 10 strange minutes the morning felt almost normal. Sunlight on tile, the smell of coffee, Rosa arguing with Nico about basil plants. A knife hitting the cutting board in a steady rhythm. Then Dante walked in, and even the sunlight seemed to know enough to stop where he stood. Dark suit again, white shirt open at the throat. A bruise shadowing one knuckle like he'd hit something recently and had not thought it worth remembering. "Come with me," he said. Rosa frowned. "She hasn't finished eating." Dante looked at my plate, then back at me. "Bring it." He took me through a corridor of glass that connected the main house to a conservatory I hadn't seen in the dark. Moist heat met us at the threshold. My breath caught citrus trees, climbing jasmine, terracotta underfoot. A long central table already set with empty urns, floral shears, spools of wire, shallow trays of soaked foam, buckets of fresh stems delivered before dawn. For one foolish second, I forgot who he was. "You brought me flowers?" I asked. He glanced at the work table. "You looked unwell without them." I stared at him. The conservatory brightened every scar in the world, a thin old one along his wrist, the sharp silver line near his jaw, the newer split over one knuckle. He noticed me noticing and flexed his hand once as if closing a window. "These are from your supplier," he said. "I paid what you owed." I set my plate down too hard. "Stop doing that." "Doing what?" "Buying pieces of my life." He held my gaze. "Then stop leaving them vulnerable." I hated that the words landed because they were true. I crossed to the table and touched the nearest bucket. White stock, dusty Miller, ranunculus so soft they felt painted. A florist's hand knows before the mind does. These were expensive, fresh, chosen well. "What is this for?" "There's a memorial mass tonight at Sant'Elena Chapel." He watched my fingers move over the stems. "I want you to do the arrangements." "For who?" "A man I buried 3 years ago," he said. I looked up. He didn't elaborate. I chose not to ask. Instead, I reached for the wire and began sorting stems by weight, color, temperature, line. My hands steadied as they worked. This was the only kind of prayer I had ever trusted. Dante stayed. Not hovering, not helping. Just there, a dark vertical stillness at the edge of the table while I stripped leaves, cut angles, built structure. "You work fast," he said after a while. "Fast is cheap," I said. "Good is expensive." I try to be both. That almost made him smile, almost. I threaded olive branches through the base, then white lisianthus, then lilies, only 3 because too many lilies made grief theatrical. "Whoever you buried," I said, "you loved him." Silence. "Then why?" "Because you didn't say his name like a subordinate." My hands kept moving. "It was easier to talk to flowers than to men like him. Also because you didn't ask for grandeur. Men who are performing grief want height, more candles, more spectacle. And what do men who mean it want?" I slid a lily lower into the arrangement and left one bruised leaf in place. Room to breathe. When I finished, he stepped closer for the first time. Too close, not touching, worse. Close enough that I noticed the cold trace of outside air clinging to his suit. Close enough that if I turned my head an inch, my shoulder would brush his chest. His hand reached past me for the ribbon spool. It snagged. I froze. The white satin ribbon dragged slowly over my fingers as he freed it from under my wrist. A whisper of fabric, nothing, everything. "Too tight," he said, looking at the stem I had bound. "It'll bruise. You know flowers?" His eyes stayed on the ribbon. "Once." That word sat between us like a locked room. I took the spool from him and tried not to think about his hand being warmer than the air had prepared me for. "The lily means return," I said. "In church work, anyway. In older language, it can mean restored innocence, or grief depending on the arrangement. You speak flowers." I was raised around people who didn't say what they meant. This was easier. A short silence. "Then what would those mean?" He nodded to the stems I'd grouped separately. "White camellia, longing, asphodel, regret, ivy, fidelity, used together." I shrugged. "Obsession with a conscience." Something changed in his face then, small but real. Interest maybe, respect, something heavier than either. A phone vibrated in his jacket. He read the message, expression flattening. "Finish this," he said. "Paolo will take you to the chapel." "Why me?" He looked at the arrangement, at my hands, at me. "Because you notice what other people don't." He left. The greenhouse seemed to exhale after him. I stood with the ribbon spool still in my hand, pulse moving badly under my skin. Then I saw it half hidden near the delivery bucket, tucked under wax paper, an envelope, no name, just cream card stock and a smear of green pollen at one corner. Inside was a single cash receipt from the St. Orlia loading dock, time stamped 2 hours before my arrival. Attached to it, folded small, was a note in block capitals. "He already knows you took the money." My stomach dropped so fast I had to grip the table. No one knew about that. No one was supposed to know that. Luciana, the event planner, had called me the day before and offered me $500 cash to reroute one centerpiece through the private elevator because a board member wanted a surprise presentation. $500 paid my electricity. $500 bought refrigeration fluid and another week of rent. I had said yes because I was tired and desperate and stupid. I had told myself it was only flowers. Behind me, glass clicked softly. I turned too late. Dante stood in the doorway again, one hand braced against the frame, unreadable. And though he said nothing at all, I knew from the look in his eyes that the note was right. He already knew. Santalina sat on a narrow street in lower Manhattan, where the buildings leaned close enough to keep secrets for each other. The chapel was small, old, and colder inside than outside, the stone holding its own winter no matter the season. I arrived with Paolo and two men carrying the arrangements behind me. Dante came separately. That should have relaxed me. It didn't. The receipt note from the conservatory was folded into my pocket, burning there every time I moved. He had not confronted me. He had not said a word about the money. Somehow that was worse than anger. Anger was weather, silence was architecture. I worked at the altar in the echo of old wood and candle smoke, building the memorial around the same white lily line he had watched me touch that morning. The organist tested a chord. Somewhere near the sacristy, men murmured in Italian. Every few minutes the heavy front doors opened and shut, bringing in the city in slices, traffic, rain smell, shoes on stone. Rosa had packed me lunch I was too nauseous to eat. Nico appeared anyway, carrying an umbrella and an expression of sincere offense. I was told this was a solemn errand, he said, eyeing the candles. No one mentioned stairs. You object to stairs now? I asked. I object to cardio under religious supervision. Paolo gave him a look. Nico leaned closer to me and lowered his voice. Rosa made me polenta for courage, which is how I know she loves me. She does not love you. She feeds me against my will. That is not romance. That is Italy. For the first time that day I laughed properly. It was still on my face when Dante walked in. He saw it. I knew he saw it because his gaze paused there for the smallest beat before shifting to the chapel, the exits, the men, the window line. He always entered a room as if it might need to be killed. The memorial guests came in black, expensive grief, cufflinks, silk scarves, a woman with veiled eyes and no tears. Dante stood near the third pew, one hand folded over the other, silent enough to pass for reverence if you did not know better. I tried not to watch him. I failed often. When the priest began, I learned the dead man's name. Matteo Salvator, Dante's younger brother. The organ filled the chapel with something too big for its walls. My hands went cold on the flower stand. Brother, that explained the room to breathe. It also explained why, when one of the older women near the front row broke into raw, animal sobs, Dante did not move, did not soothe, did not look. He stood with his jaw locked and his eyes fixed on the lilies beside the coffin as if motion itself might split him open. I understood then that his stillness was not emptiness. It was cost. After the service, I waited until the family began to clear. The candle smoke had gone thick, wax and lilies and incense tangled in the air. I was halfway down the side stair carrying a bronze stand when the blast hit. Not huge, not cinematic, worse, a hard crack from outside, windows shuddering, the stand lurched in my hands. Glass burst somewhere behind me. Men shouted. Someone yelled in Italian. My foot slid on candle wax and I went down hard, the bronze stand wrenching from my grip. I remember the sound my body made on stone, then a hand closed around my ankle, strong, immediate. I twisted, panicked, but he was already there below me on the stairs. One knee braced, one arm catching the stand before it crushed my ribs. The other holding my leg with a grip so controlled it felt frighteningly deliberate. Don't move, Dante. Dust drifted through the air. Somewhere a woman screamed. Someone outside was firing again, short, efficient pops, not chaos. Message, my breath came fast. My head, you didn't hit it. His palm slid up my calf, checking damage through the fabric of my skirt, clinical and careful and somehow more intimate for being neither. Can you stand? I nodded. He didn't believe me. He set the stand aside and came up one step closer, one hand on the stair rail beside my hip, boxing me in without touching anything he didn't need to. There was blood on his cuff, not his, I thought first. Then I saw the shallow slice across his hand where the broken window had caught him. You're bleeding, I said. His expression did not change. Can you stand, Sophia? I swallowed. Yes. He released my ankle slowly like he was telling his own body to do it. When I rose, I swayed. His hand caught my waist, just once, just enough. The world snapped narrow and bright. He let go immediately. Outside, men were already moving, shoes striking pavement in disciplined bursts. Paolo's voice came through my earpiece, less fear, giving orders. Nico, somewhere nearby, shouted, If I die in church, tell Rosa I always appreciated her lasagna. Even Paolo barked a laugh at that. Dante looked toward the shattered side window, then back to me. The cut in his hand was dripping onto the stone. He didn't seem to feel it. It was a distraction, he said. The bomb was small. Designed to move us. Who? His gaze flicked to the altar flowers, to the lilies, to me. The device in your arrangement was a listening transmitter. He finally said it. Tonight's attack was meant to confirm what they heard. My throat closed. I told you I didn't know. I know, then why do you keep looking at me like that? He went very still. Like what? Like I'm an answer. Something crossed his face then, fast, almost pain. Before he could speak, Tommaso appeared at the top of the stairwell, breathing hard. Luciana Voss is gone, he said. Apartment cleared, phone dead. The event woman, Dante nodded once. No surprise, Tommaso's eyes moved to me, to Dante's bleeding hand. To where I was standing one step below him, too close. Understanding darkened his expression in a way I didn't like. Not jealousy, not approval, something older, more tired. Get her out, Dante said. I can walk, I snapped. His eyes came to me level and cold. Then do it. Paolo guided people through the side aisle while Tommaso spoke low into his phone. Dante didn't touch me again until we reached the sacristy door and another crack sounded outside, closer this time. Then his hand landed between my shoulder blades, firm enough to move me through the doorway before I had time to resent it. Inside, the room smelled of old linen and incense. Vestments hung in dark rows, a brass sink gleamed under yellow light. My hands were shaking again. Dante shut the door. The noise outside went muffled. Sit, he said. I'm fine. Sit. I sat. He crouched once in front of me, quick and efficient, checking my ankle where he had caught me on the stairs. His touch was impersonal, but the fact of him kneeling at all did something strange to my breathing. He pressed 2 fingers lightly over the bone. Pain, a little, swelling will come. He rose before I could answer and turned toward the sink. That was when I saw how much blood was running from his hand. Stop, I said. He didn't. I stood too fast, crossed the room, and caught his wrist before I thought better of it. The whole world seemed to stop at the point where my fingers closed around him. His skin was warm. The tendons in his wrist tightened once hard. He looked down at my hand, then at my face. I let go at once. You need that cleaned. It's nothing. It's still attached, yes. That doesn't make it nothing. For a second, something almost human moved under the ice of his expression. Not softness, surprise. I opened the cabinet under the sink, found gauze and antiseptic, and held them up. Sit. I don't take orders. I noticed. He should have said no. Instead, he pulled out the wooden chair by the vestment table and sat in it with the resigned look of a king humoring a peasant who had wandered too close to the throne. I knelt in front of him. That felt like a mistake the moment I did it. The room had gone very quiet, not chapel quiet, more dangerous than that. I poured antiseptic over the cut and he did not flinch, but I saw the muscle jump in his jaw. The slice ran across his palm and into the base of his thumb, deep enough to hurt every time he closed his hand. You should have stitches, I murmured. I've had worse. I wrapped gauze carefully. His hand was large, scarred in older places, the skin rough where a man's hands only get rough by using them for real things. Not typing, not golf, work, violence, survival, all of it. Your brother, I said before I could stop myself. He died in a church, a long pause, then on church steps. I tied the bandage and kept my eyes on it. I'm sorry. So am I looked up. His face was unreadable again, but his gaze had gone somewhere far from the sacristy, somewhere full of stone and smoke and things he had failed to prevent. My mother used to work with flowers, he said, and the sentence was so unexpected it took me a beat to understand it. She said broken stems should be cut clean. Otherwise they rot the water. The sharp green scent of bruised lilies rushed back through me. I swallowed. That's what my father taught me. For the first time since I had met him, Dante looked unsettled, not visibly, not enough for anyone else, but enough that I saw it. He stood too fast. The chair legs scraped stone. We're leaving. The moment sealed shut. Outside, the gunfire had stopped. Sirens were still far away, held off by money or fear or both. Nico burst into the sacristy carrying 2 umbrellas and a face arranged into elaborate tragedy. Good news, he announced. No one important died. Paolo behind him said flatly, you were also present. I said what I said. Nico's gaze dropped to Dante's bandaged hand, then to me. Ah. Florence Nightingale, but with better cheekbones. Heat climbed into my face. Dante didn't react, which was somehow its own reaction. On the drive back, rain hit the windows in hard, slanting lines. I watched the city blur and thought about Matteo Salvator bleeding on church steps, about Dante kneeling on stone to catch me before I hit it, about his mother and my father teaching the same lesson with broken stems. At the villa, he waited until I was out of the car before speaking. From now on, he said, you do not go anywhere without my men. I turned, angry because I was frightened and could not separate the two. That sounds a lot like prison. He stood under the courtyard light, rain silvering his dark hair at the temples. No, he said, prison would require your permission to matter. I stared at him. Then he stepped closer just enough for his voice to drop. You were attacked on sacred ground tonight, Fior. Don't confuse my restraint for freedom. He went inside, leaving me in the rain with my pulse tripping over itself. And for the first time since he had taken me from the hotel, I understood something clearly. He was trying very hard not to touch me. The next morning, my phone was returned to me with 3 missed calls from my landlord. 7 from suppliers, and 1 voicemail from my shop assistant, Mina, who sounded like she was trying not to cry. Sophia, someone came by asking questions about the gala order. I told them nothing because I know nothing, which is honestly a flaw in your management style. Also, there are 2 men outside pretending to buy begonias. No one buys begonias in suits. Call me. I listened to it twice, then a 3rd time because panic likes repetition. When I turned, Dante was standing in the conservatory doorway. I had not heard him come in. You checked my phone? Yes, you're impossible, so I'm told. I should have been too furious to notice how tired he looked. He had changed into a charcoal suit, but the bandage on his hand was still there beneath the cuff, white against his wrist when he moved. Mina is at the shop, I said. If men are watching it, she's been moved. My heart stopped. What? To Rose's sister's house in Brooklyn. She complained the whole drive and asked for her laptop twice. He paused. She appears unharmed. Relief hit me so hard it made my knees weak. I braced a hand on the work table. Dante saw it. Of course he did. You should have told me, I said. You were asleep, and you don't believe in waking women with news about their businesses. His gaze stayed on me. I believe in letting them sleep when they've had a gun pointed at their life. My throat tightened for a reason I did not appreciate. I turned away and reached for a spool of ribbon, then stopped. My ribbon drawer was open. Inside, the compartments I kept obsessively sorted had been lifted out and set on the table beside a clear evidence bag. In it lay the receipt from the St. Aurelia loading dock, the note, and 5 crisp $100 bills. He had found the money. Of course he had found the money. I closed my eyes. When were you going to tell me? He asked. There was no anger in his voice, no raised edge, just that same awful calm. I don't know, that's not an answer. I turned to face him. Luciana called the day before the gala. She said a donor wanted a private reveal and needed one arrangement rerouted through the elevator. She offered cash. I said yes, I shouldn't have, I know that. But I didn't plant anything. I didn't even know there was anything to plant. How much debt are you in? I laughed once, sharp and joyless. That is such a crazy question to ask, like we're discussing weather. How much? I folded my arms because I suddenly needed something between us. Enough. His expression did not change. My father got sick, I said, and the words felt rusty. The shop survived him by 6 months. Refrigeration broke last winter. The landlord raised rent because the neighborhood is being polished into a place people like me can't afford to stand in anymore. I kept telling myself one good event would fix it. Then another. Then another. His gaze moved to the cash in the bag, and when a stranger offered you money to ignore your instincts, you took it. It should have sounded cruel. It sounded accurate. Yes, the silence stretched. Say something, I snapped. He stepped closer, not threatening, not soft. You made a desperate decision. Desperate people are easy to use. That makes you vulnerable, Sophia, not disposable. I blinked. He looked almost irritated that he had said it. I turned away before he could see the effect of it. My hands needed work and flowers were kinder than pride. On the table sat Rose's request for tonight, centerpieces for a dinner with Dante's captains. I began stripping thorns from pale garden roses too fast and one caught the pad of my thumb. Blood welled. Stop, Dante said. I'm fine. He was beside me before I finished the lie. He took my hand, no ceremony, no hesitation. My whole body went still. His thumb pressed just below the cut to slow the blood. The bandage on his other hand brushed my wrist, white against skin. Gauze against pulse. I could hear the greenhouse misting system click on above us, the fine hiss of water over leaves. Florists, he said quietly, still looking at my hand, bleed more than soldiers. That seems unlikely. Soldiers expect it. I should have pulled away, I didn't. He wrapped my thumb in a strip of floral tape from the table, inefficient but careful. When he lifted his head, we were far too close. His gaze dropped to my mouth, then rose again. Then he stepped back, second restraint. I let out a breath I had not meant him to hear. He turned to the half-finished centerpiece instead. What's wrong with this one? I stared at the arrangement because staring at him seemed medically unsound. It's too balanced. That's bad. It means I'm lying. He looked at me. I swallowed. Real things lean. One side always wants more light. Something unreadable moved through his face. Make me the one you'd make if you weren't pretending, he said, so I did. I stripped the design down, built it again. Bitter chocolate dahlias at the base, dark and almost bruised. White ranunculus in the center, soft as hesitation. One fragile arch of lily grass over the top, thin enough to tremble if anyone breathed too hard near it. Rosa wandered in halfway through, took one look, and hummed approval. This one feels dangerous. Thank you, I said. She tapped the dahlia. Looks hard, bruises easy. Just like all of you. Nico appeared in the doorway as if summoned by the possibility of lunch and peered over her shoulder. If that arrangement is emotional, I'm charging extra for transportation. He leaned closer, then looked at Dante. Boss, with respect, this flower thing is getting sophisticated. Should I be worried the table will judge me? It already does, Rosa said. Nico sighed. See how she wounds me. But when he left, he glanced back once at Rosa with a softness he made no effort to hide. It landed in me strangely, warmth in a place built for colder things. That evening at dinner, I carried the centerpieces into a room full of armed men trying to behave like businessmen. Their voices lowered when Dante entered. The air changed, silverware settled. I placed the flowers down the length of the table and felt eyes on me the whole time, not all his. Tommaso watched me with an expression I could not read, concern maybe, or calculation. Then, as he rose to pull out a chair for one of the older captains, I saw a corner of cream card stock protruding from his inside pocket. Same heavy stock as the note. My skin went cold. He noticed my gaze and covered it with his hand too quickly. When Dante sat at the head of the table, he glanced once at the arrangement nearest him, then at me across the room. The smallest nod. Approval, trust, maybe not, but something less sharp than before. I should have felt relieved. Instead, all I could think was this. If Tommaso had put the note in the greenhouse, then either he was warning me, or he was the reason I needed warning. The flower market opened before sunrise and smelled like wet cardboard, diesel, coffee, and green life cut from soil too recently. I had begged to go. That is not dignified, but it is true. There are stems there I need for the chapel replacements. I had told Dante across the breakfast room table, while Nico tried to scrape the frosting off a pastry Rosa had accidentally placed beside his boiled eggs. Also, Mina knows the wholesalers, and if the shop survives this week, it'll be because I personally remind 3 men in the Bronx that I can still make them money. No, Dante had said. I'm asking, not escaping. No, I turned to Rosa. Does he come with subtitles? She buttered toast serenely. No just means negotiate better. So I did, for 10 minutes, then 20. I was halfway through accusing him of confusing protection with control when Tommaso entered and murmured something in Italian too low for me to catch. Dante's expression flattened. He looked at me. You leave in 10 minutes, which should not have felt like victory. It did. The convoy was absurd for a flower market. 2 black SUVs, Paolo in front, Nico driving the second with an expression of tragic martyrdom. I used to have a normal life, he told me as we rolled through the dark. Now I escort women to chrysanthemums under armed watch. You're exaggerating. I'm underfed and unappreciated. If I fade before 30, tell Rosa this is on her. Because she feeds you, because she toys with my hope. I laughed, then looked out the window before the sound could turn into anything else. New York before dawn was all shuttered storefronts and bakery lights just waking. I used to love this hour. It belonged to workers, not owners. At the market, men called greetings across pallets. Forklifts beeped and buckets clattered. For 20 blessed minutes I was only a florist again, elbow deep in stock and eucalyptus. Arguing over stem quality with Sal from Jersey, while Nico wandered behind me holding a coffee and announcing that peonies were emotionally manipulative. Dante stayed near the loading dock. Hands in his coat pockets, a dark shape among steam and headlights. Men looked at him and then away. Even here, among labor and mud and truck exhaust, power followed him like weather. I found the lilies myself, white oriental lilies still closed. Their scent sat inside them waiting. When I lifted a bunch to my face, I felt him before I saw him. Cold air, wool, silence. You always smell them first, Dante asked. I lowered the stems. It tells me how far open they are. If they've started to perfume, they won't last the event. He looked at the lilies, at me. And these, tomorrow night, maybe the next morning. He reached out and touched a petal with the back of one finger, careful enough that something in my chest hurt. You know exactly how long beautiful things have left. I should have said something clever. Instead I said, usually. His gaze came to my face, stayed there. Almost number 3 hovered between us, full and bright and impossible to ignore. Then the first shot cracked through the market, everything broke at once. Men shouted, buckets toppled. A forklift reversed too fast and clipped a display of hydrangeas into the aisle. Dante moved before the echo died. One arm hooked around my waist and yanked me behind a pallet of soil so hard my breath vanished. Down, I hit concrete with his body over mine, one hand braced beside my head, the other drawing a gun from somewhere under his coat with terrifying calm. Another shot, another. Too precise for panic. This was not chaos, this was hunting. Nico, I heard Paolo bark. Alive, Nico shouted from somewhere impossibly far away. Emotionally changed but alive. A bullet punched through the pallet above us. Dirt rained down. Dante's hand pressed the back of my head lower, protective, possessive, absolute. Stay here, he said. My fingers caught his sleeve before I could stop myself. Don't. His eyes dropped to my hand. For one raw second, something cracked in his composure. Then he covered my hand with his, squeezed once, and was gone. I crouched behind the pallet with my heart trying to climb out through my mouth. Shouts in Italian, gunfire, tires, a man screaming. I looked to the left and saw Sal from Jersey flat on the floor clutching his shoulder, blood soaking through his market jacket. I crawled to him before common sense had time to file an objection. Sophia, press here. I shoved a bundle of burlap into his good hand and looked around wildly. Plastic wrap, box cutter, floral wire, my brain grabbed what it knew. I tore open a sleeve of hydrangea leaves, packed the wound tight with clean liners, bound it with wire and cloth hard enough to make him swear at me in 3 languages. Keep pressure, I said. A shadow fell over us. I looked up to find one of the shooters cutting through the aisle, not one of Dante's men. Wrong suit, wrong eyes, gun raised. He saw me and smiled. Then Dante hit him from the side like something unchained. There was no flourish in it, no speech, just terrifying efficiency. Wrist broken first, gun gone second. Throat crushed against a metal rack hard enough to bend it. The man dropped with a sound I knew would come back in dreams. Dante turned to me, chest rising once, twice. Blood spattered his cheek. Not his, I knew that because there was so much of it. He came down to one knee in front of me. Are you hit? I shook my head. His hand cupped the back of my neck, checking, grounding. I wasn't sure which. When he realized I was whole, his eyes closed for the briefest second. Relief, pure and ugly. The sight of it undid me more than the gunfire had. I told you not to move, he said, voice rougher than I had ever heard it. Sal was bleeding. His gaze flicked to the wire dressing I had improvised. Surprise flashed there, genuine this time. You did that? I know how to keep cut things alive. Something shifted in his face. Pride maybe, fear definitely. He stood and pulled me with him, one hand at my waist. Too close, too necessary. Sirens were coming now, real ones or purchased ones, I couldn't tell. In the SUV, my hands started shaking too late. Dante sat opposite me, forearms braced on his knees, staring at the smear of dirt on my cheek as if he wanted to erase it with violence. Nico, beside the driver, twisted around with white-knuckled indignation. I would like it noted, he said, that I stayed on my diet through active gunfire. That is character. No one answered. He pointed at Dante. This silence is why I need carbohydrates. Back at the villa, the shaking turned worse. Delayed shock, Rosa called it. She wrapped a blanket around me and tried to force sugared tea between my hands. Dante stood in the doorway, watching. When Rosa finally left, he came in and shut the door softly behind him. The room smelled faintly of crushed lilies. I had brought the market stems back. They lay on my desk in a bucket, beginning to breathe into the air. I should never have let you go, he said. The words were low, barely there. I looked at him. I asked. I know. He crossed the room slowly, like a man approaching a wild thing he did not want to startle. His knuckles brushed the blanket at my shoulder, then rose to my face. Stopped there, I could have moved. I didn't. His thumb touched the dirt on my cheek and wiped it away. Just that, nothing more. I know why, he said, and I understood at once that he was not speaking about the market. Not really. That night in the hotel, why I couldn't leave you there. My breath caught. He looked at the lilies in the bucket, then back at me. You were crying and you still cut the broken stem clean. You tried to save it before yourself. His voice dropped. No one in my world does that, Fior. The nickname landed differently this time. Not a lock, a wound. He bent slowly enough to let me stop him. I whispered the only true thing I had. If you kiss me now, I won't understand what it means. His breath hitched. Then he rested his forehead briefly against mine instead, 1 second, maybe 2, and stepped back. War had arrived. We both knew it. By noon, my flower shop was ash and wet plaster. Bellini flowers had never been much to look at from the outside. Narrow front, green awning fading into gray. Display window with old brass trim my father swore had character, and I privately suspected had mold. But it was mine. Mine in the way grief can be yours, expensive, inconvenient, stitched into your idea of yourself whether you like it or not. Someone had thrown a firebomb through the front window before dawn. By the time Paolo drove me there, the firefighters were gone and the place smelled like steam, soot, and the wet, rotten sweetness of cooked petals. Mina was on the curb in Rose's coat, red-eyed and furious. You said nothing weird would happen if I closed early, she said the second she saw me. This is so much weirder than early closing. I hugged her before I could answer. She went stiff from surprise, then hugged me back hard enough to bruise. Inside, the refrigerators had blackened. Buckets had melted into sad plastic halos. My father's workbench was split down the middle. Every ribbon I had ever sorted so carefully was fused into colorless lumps. Dante came in behind me and stopped. He did not speak. That frightened me more than if he had sworn. On the floor beneath the register lay a white lily, half-burned, laid there after the fire as neatly as a signature. Message received. Mina saw it too. Who does that? I couldn't answer. Paolo guided her back outside, gentle in a way I hadn't expected from him. I remained where I was, staring at the ruin. It's because of me, I said. No, Dante's voice came from very close behind me. It's because of me, I turned. That's not better. I didn't offer it as comfort. There it was, the hard truth of him. He would not lie to make grief easier. Sometimes I hated that. Sometimes I didn't know what to do with how much I didn't. I crouched beside the ruined counter and picked up the half-burned lily. My fingers came away black. This was all I had, I said softly. He watched me for a long moment. You still have a choice. I looked up. There's a house in Vermont, he said. No staff. No names attached to me. You can go there tonight with money enough to start again. New papers if you want them. The offer hit me like a slap I had earned. You'd let me go. His jaw tightened once. Yes, because this was the real exit, not a test, not a manipulation, an actual door standing open in a burning room. I could take Mina, leave New York. Rebuild somewhere with cheaper rent and kinder weather and no men who wore violence like a second shirt. I should have said yes immediately. Instead, I looked at the shop one more time and thought of Dante kneeling on church stairs, of his hand around my neck in the market, checking me for blood before himself. Of the way he had not kissed me because I wouldn't understand it. The danger had moved inside me sometime without permission. I want the truth first, I said. He was silent. About Mateo. About why that hotel mattered. About why lilies make you look like someone hit you where there's no bruise. His gaze dropped briefly to the burned flower in my hand. My mother was a florist, he said. She worked events at the St. Aurelia when I was a boy. They turned her away after using her work, refused payment. Humiliated her in the lobby while I watched from the service stairs because she'd brought me with her and told me to stay hidden. His voice never rose, that made it worse. She came home with split fingers from stripping thorns too fast and told me broken stems can still drink if you cut them clean. I could barely breathe. That night, he said, men came for my father, they found her instead. The shop blurred. Mateo was 16 when he died, a bomb meant for me, church steps. Same man behind both. Cesar Valenti, he looked at me sharply. Who told you that name? No one. Mina hears things, delivery drivers talk. It was a lie. The truth was worse. My father had owed money to a lender tied to Valenti's restaurants. I had seen the surname on invoices and pretended not to understand what that meant. But some truths arrive in pieces and only become criminal when viewed whole. Dante stepped closer. If you stay near me, Sophia, this is the cost. I looked down at my ruined shop. At the dead lily in my hand. I know, no you don't. That stung because it was also true. By evening, I was in the Vermont car anyway, bag packed, papers in an envelope. Nico driving with such visible misery you would have thought rural safety offended him personally. There are bears there, he muttered as the city fell behind us. Do you know what a bear is? A murder rug with opinions. You don't have to come, exactly. And yet here I am, abandoned by love and sentenced to mountains. He kept talking because he knew silence would let me hear myself too clearly. I loved him a little for that. But when we reached the first service stop on the interstate and he got out to buy coffee, I looked at the envelope on my lap and understood something with horrible clarity. If I left now, I would survive, and I would think of him every time I cut a stem clean, every time a room went still, every time I smelled lilies. That was not escape, that was exile. When Nico came back balancing 2 coffees and a protein bar he clearly despised, my door was open and I was standing by the pumps. He froze. No, I have to go back. No, I'm serious. So am I. Rosa will kill me and she'll do it slowly, which is ironic because she cooks with butter. Nico, he set the coffees on the hood and dragged both hands down his face. You understand this is the worst romantic gesture I've ever witnessed. I'm not being romantic. He looked at me for a full beat. That's how I know you're doomed. Back at the villa, the gates opened on midnight. Dante was in the courtyard, coatless, as if he had been standing there for hours, refusing to call it waiting. I got out of the car and shut the door myself. His expression did not change, but something in him went so still it scared me. I told him to take you to Vermont, he said to Nico without looking away from me. Nico lifted both hands, and I told her bears were real. None of us were respected. Then he vanished with astonishing speed. I walked toward Dante on unsteady legs. I could have left. Yes, I didn't, he said nothing. I had never been more frightened in my life than I was of the next sentence. If I stay, I said, I stay knowing what you are, what this is. I don't get to pretend anymore. His gaze moved over my face as if searching for the lie that would save him from believing me. There's nothing noble here, I whispered. I'm not staying because I'm trapped. I'm staying because when I tried to leave, it felt like tearing out the last thing in me that still knew where home was. The silence between us changed shape. He came close enough that I felt the heat of him in the night air. When he spoke, his voice was almost gone. Come inside, Fior, and I went to him with my eyes open. After I chose to stay, everything became sharper. Not easier, never that, but sharper. The villa no longer felt like a beautiful prison. It felt like a fortress under strain. Men moved faster. Phones rang and were answered in single syllables. Deliveries were checked twice. Dante slept less than I thought a human body could survive. He also did a new and terrible thing. He trusted me with pieces. Not all, never enough to make me comfortable, but enough. Maps on the library table. Names. 2 warehouses in Red Hook, 1 funeral parlor in Yonkers, a shipping company with no ships. I stood beside him while he traced routes with one scarred finger and realized how much of his intelligence lived in silence. You think Valenti has someone close, I said. I know he does. Tommaso, Dante's face gave me nothing. That was answer enough. My stomach dropped. Then why is he still here? Because if I move too soon, I lose what he's hiding. That night I couldn't sleep. The house creaked around me in the old hour way large houses do, all settling beams and distant plumbing. I went downstairs for water and found Tommaso in the kitchen, alone, staring at the dark window over the sink. He looked older in the half-light, not weaker, just worn thin. You should be asleep, he said. So should you. A sad, almost smile touched his mouth. I had children, sleep never recovered. I leaned against the island and folded my arms. You keep warning me without warning me. His gaze moved to mine. Do you? I asked. For a long time he said nothing. Then, if a man has one hand around your throat and the other around your daughter's, which promise do you break first? Cold spread through me. He shut his eyes once. Go to your room, Sophia. I should have run to Dante that instant. Instead I hesitated, because Tommaso had looked at me in the chapel like a man already mourning. Because I had seen gentleness in him, because I was still stupid enough to think sadness might cancel danger. That mistake cost us both. The next afternoon, Rosa sent me to the old East Wing to choose linens for the smaller dining room. If I let men pick tablecloths, we all live like widowers, she said. Nico, hovering nearby with a celery stick and martyr's soul, added, I would pick black, it hides my suffering. I smiled and went. The East Wing was rarely used, colder than the main house, the marble floors holding a deeper chill. Half the rooms were shuttered, dust and lemon polish, quiet thick enough to hear your own pulse. The linen room door was already open. Inside, white sheets were stacked in tall, neat shelves. One bulb burned overhead too bright. Tommaso stood at the far end. I stopped. He looked at me the way men look at churches after doing something they cannot undo inside them. Don't scream, he said. The door shut behind me, not slammed, just closed. 2 men stepped from the blind corner by the shelves. I moved on instinct, grabbing the nearest basket of clothespins and hurling it at the first one's face. It bought me 1 second, maybe less. I ran for the side door, but the second man caught my arm hard enough to bruise and twisted. Pain shot up to my shoulder. Let her go, Tommaso snapped. The man ignored him. I kicked backward, connected with a shin, tore free for 2 staggering steps, then got shoved into the shelving so hard the stacks of linen toppled over us in a white avalanche. A pillowcase over my mouth, a hand at my throat. No, the scent hit me through the cotton, sharp, green, sweet, crushed lilies. There was a bloom tucked in the attacker's lapel, Valenti's joke. I bit the hand over the cloth, he cursed. I drove my elbow back blindly and felt cartilage give. Then a needle punched into my neck, the room tilted. Last thing I saw before the dark came down was Tommaso lunging forward, shouting my name like a prayer too late to matter. When I woke, I was in a room with no windows. White walls, white chair. White tile, a single steel drain in the center of the floor. My wrists were bound in front of me with zip ties. My head throbbed. There were bruises blooming already along my arms. The lilies were stronger here. A vase sat on the table beside me, 6 white lilies opening into the stale air like mouths. Cesare Valenti entered without hurry. He was older than Dante, elegant in the dry, preserved way of men who outsource their ugliness. Silver at the temples, beautiful suit, eyes like old coins. You look disappointed, he said. I was hoping for someone less theatrical, he smiled. Good, he likes that about you too. My fear did something strange then, it steadied. Tommaso's family, I asked, his smile thinned. Alive for the moment because he has been useful. The door opened again, Tommaso stepped in. His face was bloodless. He could not meet my eyes, something in me broke cleanly in 2. Why, I whispered. He flinched like I had hit him. Cesare answered for him, because men like Dante demand loyalty as if it costs nothing. Because fathers are always weakest where they love best. Tommaso finally looked at me then, and there were tears standing in his eyes he refused to let fall. I tried to steer it away from you, he said. I swear to God I did. You opened the door. Yes, the word gutted the room. I should have hated him only. Instead, I hated the part of me that understood. Cesare drew out a chair and sat across from me. Dante is coming, he said. Of course he is. Men like him cannot help confusing devotion with strategy. I said nothing. He leaned in slightly. When he arrives, I want him softened, distracted, bleeding in the places armor does not cover. You are going to help me with that. He slid a phone across the table with my hands still bound too tightly to reach it well. On the screen was Rosa in her kitchen, tied to a chair. Nico on the floor beside her, conscious and furious, a bruise darkening his cheek. My stomach turned over. If you refuse, Cesar said pleasantly, I begin taking pieces. Tommaso made a sound under his breath, not agreement, agony. I lifted my chin. If you know anything about Dante, you know threatening people he loves is how men die. Cesar smiled wider. Then let us see how many he can bury before he comes apart. The lilies in the vase had opened fully now. Their scent was almost unbearable. I stared at them and realized, with a clarity so sharp it hurt, that flowers had always been used here the way other men used knives. Tommaso turned away first. And somewhere beyond the white walls, time started running out. Captivity was colder than fear. Fear moved, spiked, shook your hands. Captivity sat still and let the room arrange itself around your helplessness until you started measuring time by sounds you hated. Footsteps, the squeal of the steel door. Water turning on in a pipe behind the wall. The slow opening of lilies on the table, their perfume growing thicker, sweeter, more rotten by the hour. Cesar wanted me frightened. He seemed personally offended when I wasn't frightened in the correct way. I was terrified, that part was true. My mouth went dry every time the door opened. My heart stumbled whenever one of his men stepped close enough to cast a shadow over me, but underneath it something else had settled. Dante was coming. The terrible part was that I did not want him to, not into this, not for me. On the second day, if it was the second. The room had no mercy enough to tell time properly. A young guard came in with a tray of soup and set it down with one hand while scrolling his phone with the other. His jacket brushed the table, knocking one of the lilies sideways. He swore and righted it carelessly. The anther had split. Orange pollen dusted the white tabletop. A florist notices everything. That had always been true. Now it kept me alive. When he left, I scooted the chair closer with tiny scraping movements and rubbed the broken lily against the edge of the zip tie at my wrists. Slow. Patient, sticky pollen first, then the rough filament, then the hidden wire inside the stem. Florists use stem wire to support delicate heads, thin enough to hide, strong enough to matter. It took forever, my wrists burned, sweat ran down my spine. Twice I had to stop because footsteps passed the door, but eventually the wire came free. I could not cut the tie with it. I could pick the cheap latch on the radiator cover bolted beneath the table. Inside was a rusted edge of vent grate and one loose screw. By the time the next guard came in, I had the screw palmed against my skin and my face arranged into something blank enough to pass for defeat. He grinned. Pretty flower. I said nothing. After he left, I used the screw to saw at the plastic tie until my wrists came free in a painful snap that nearly made me cry out. I did cry then briefly, quietly, not from fear. From relief so sharp it felt like loss. The phone Cesar had shown me was gone, but the table remained. So did the lilies, so did the chair. I broke the vase against the floor drain and kept the longest shard. Not as a weapon, that would have been fantasy. As a mirror. The shard let me see under the door when footsteps stopped outside. 2 guards on rotation, one heavier, one smoker. The smoker wore expensive shoes with red-brown dust in the grooves of the soles, brick dust, warehouse dust. And once when the door opened wider than usual, I heard gulls. Water nearby. Red Hook then, or the river. I had enough information to pray with, not enough to escape cleanly. I needed a signal. The next tray came with bread wrapped in butcher paper. I used the broken lily pollen and a wet fingertip to write on the underside where only a careful person would see it. Red Hook / White Room / TOMMASO forced when the smoker guard returned for the tray. I let my voice shake. That part took no acting. Please, I said, I need water. He rolled his eyes, set the tray down, and turned toward the sink at the back of the room. I shoved the paper beneath the heel of his shoe. He stepped in it, tracked it out. A useless plan unless one of Dante's men searched trash with the same attention I gave flowers. I had no better one. Hours later, night maybe, I heard shouting in the corridor. Fast, closer, then gunfire, muffled by concrete but unmistakable. My whole body went cold and hot at once. The heavy guard drew his weapon and opened the door a crack. I moved, chair leg to knee, hard enough to make him fold. Glass shard to wrist, he yelled. The gun skidded across the tile. I did not reach for it. I reached for the keys clipped at his belt. The second guard burst in and stopped with a knife under his throat. Tommaso, his hand shook. The knife did not. Drop it, he told the guard. The man stared. Are you insane? Yes, Tommaso said softly. For years now. The guard dropped the gun. Tommaso kicked it toward me. Take it. I stared at him. He looked older than he had that morning in the kitchen. Older than fathers should look before they bury themselves alive. My daughter is in the loading bay office, he said. Cesar moved her when Dante broke the outer gate. If I go for her, he lives. If I go for Cesar, she dies. The choice was there, raw, unfair, human. I understood then what kind of mirror villain Cesare had always been, not Dante's opposite, Dante with love twisted into leverage. Tommaso looked at me with naked shame. I cannot ask forgiveness. No, I said, my voice broke. You can't. A sad breath left him. Good, then you still know what this world costs. He opened the door wider. Smoke was already pushing under it. Alarm lights strobed red across the white room, making blood of everything. Left, then stairs, he said. He's coming. How do you know? Tommaso almost smiled. Because he has been coming since the day he saw you kneel over that flower. He shoved me into the corridor just as a shot cracked from the far end. Tommaso turned toward it, raising his gun. I ran. The warehouse corridor reeked of cordite, river damp, and lilies crushed under boots. Men shouted below. Somewhere metal doors slammed. I reached the stairwell, slipped on something wet, caught the rail, kept going. At the bottom landing, I hit a body chest first. Dante. He caught me before I could fall, and for one fractured second neither of us moved. His face was streaked with smoke. Blood darkened his collar. His eyes, when they found mine, looked like the aftermath of prayer denied too many times. He touched my face with both hands as if confirming shape. Real, warm, alive. Then his forehead hit mine once, brutally gentle. No words, he did not need any. The whole room said them for him. Behind me, another shot echoed down the stairwell. Tommaso. Dante's eyes closed for half a beat. When they opened, the softness was gone, not erased, buried. Can you stand? He asked. Yes. Can you run? Yes. He nodded once, the old calm sliding back into place like a blade. Then stay behind me, Fior. Nico appeared at the loading bay door with Rose's kitchen apron tied around his arm like a bandage and soot across his forehead. Excellent, he called over the alarms. The romantic leads are reunited. Can we leave before I become abstract art? Rosa, behind him with a stolen shotgun and murder in her eyes, snapped, Move. I almost laughed, almost sobbed. We ran. Outside, the river wind hit my face hard enough to wake the dead. Men were still exchanging fire near the trucks. Paolo waved us toward the SUV, but Dante stopped dead halfway there and looked back at the warehouse. Cesare stood in the third-floor office window, watching, alive. His face, lit by flame behind glass, was calm, interested, as if this had all gone close enough to plan. Dante's hand found mine once, brief, crushing, gone. One of them was not surviving the end of this. We both knew it. Tommaso died before sunrise, not in some grand cinematic way, no final speech, no blood-spit confession under rain. He died in a hospital room that smelled like antiseptic and overworked air conditioning. With Dante standing at the foot of the bed and me in the chair by the window pretending grief has etiquette when it enters a room. The bullet had gone through lung and artery. Paolo said the surgeons did what they could. Men always say that when the outcome has already chosen itself. Tommaso's daughter arrived just after 4. Mid-30s, exhausted. Her little boy asleep over her shoulder, thumb in his mouth, unaware his grandfather was dying because he had loved him badly and too much at once. Tommaso looked at the child and broke, not visibly to anyone who did not know him. To me, who had watched him hold silence like a professional for weeks, it was shattering. Dante, he said. Dante stepped closer. Tommaso's voice was barely air. Basement safe, river house in Rye, he keeps the old ledgers there, letters to your father. Your mother, he coughed, blood threading the corner of his mouth. I opened the door for her, for Sophia, not because I chose him over you. His eyes found Dante's. Because I thought I'd already lost everyone else. Dante stood so still he seemed carved from the dark. I know, he said, it was not absolution, it was worse, understanding. Tommaso's gaze moved to me. You should hate us both. I don't know how to do anything that's simple anymore, I whispered. His mouth trembled once, maybe in gratitude, maybe pain. He died holding his daughter's wrist. Afterward, Dante went into the hall and did not return for 10 minutes. When he did, there was blood on his bandaged hand where he had driven the healing cut open again with his own fist. By evening, we were driving north. The river house sat behind wrought iron and old money, a stone estate overlooking black water and winter trees stripped to bone. Cesare had used it for private meetings for years under a shell company so respectable it made me want to spit. We went in through the service entrance. Of course we did. I wore dark clothes Rosa had chosen because apparently there are rules for being useful in a raid. My wrists were still bruised from the zip ties. Dante looked at them once while we waited in the pantry off the kitchen, and something dangerous darkened in his face so completely I had to look away. You stay with Paolo, he said. No, his head turned slowly. I know where the safe is, I said. He said basement, old ledgers and letters. If you kill Cesare before you get them, half the proof burns with him. Paolo muttered something that sounded prayer adjacent. Dante stepped closer. You think I brought you here to bargain? I think you brought me because you stopped lying to yourself about whether I'm part of this. The silence between us sharpened. Then, very softly, he said, "That is exactly why you should stay behind me. It should have ended there." Instead, I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the florist shears I had taken from my work apron the day of the fire. Clean, oiled, familiar. Rosa made a scandalized noise. "She brought tools. She's Bellini," Nico whispered like a man witnessing religion. "Of course she brought tools." Dante looked at the shears, then at me. A near smile touched his mouth and vanished. "Fine," he said. "You find the ledgers. Paolo stays with you. If I say run, you run." The basement smelled of damp stone, mildew, and the stale floral sweetness of old arrangements left to die in side rooms. There were offices below the main floor, each too elegant to admit its real purpose. I followed the hall by memory of Tommaso's few words and by florist instinct. Houses like this always hid safes in humidity-stable interior rooms away from exterior walls. Third door. Wine inventory room turned records vault. The keypad was old, brass worn thin around certain numbers. I thought of flower orders, of anniversaries, death dates. Men like Cesar trusted sentiment more than technology. Matteo's death date failed, Dante's mother S did not. The lock clicked. Paolo stared at me. How? Because men who think pain makes them original are usually boring. Inside the safe were ledgers, cash, passports, and two tied bundles of letters yellowed at the edges. One marked Lucia. One Oralia. I knew without opening them that this room was where ghosts were stored. Gunfire erupted upstairs, closer than before. Paolo grabbed the ledgers. "Move." We hit the main hall just as Nico slid down the banister, firing wildly and shouting, "This is not how I imagined dying, but I blame everyone." Rosa, behind an overturned console table, yelled. "Less drama, more bullets." I nearly laughed from sheer disbelief. Then I saw Cesare. He stood at the far end of the gallery with one hand around Dante's wounded arm and a gun angled toward his ribs, using him as if men like Dante could be held by anything so ordinary. Blood ran from a cut at Dante's temple. His face was calm, too calm, mirror to mirror. "Put it down," Cesare called when he saw me. "Or I finish what your father started when he chose flowers over obedience." Dante's gaze found mine, one look, not fear, instruction, trust. I understood at once. I lifted the florist's shears. Cesare smiled. "That's not a weapon." "No," I said, "it's a florist's answer," and threw them not at him but at the crystal bowl of lilies on the console beside his shoulder. The bowl shattered. Water exploded across marble. Lilies and glass went underfoot. Cesare slipped exactly half a step. Half a step was enough. Dante drove his elbow backward, broke free, twisted the gun wrist once, and everything after that happened in the brutal economy that made men fear him. No speeches, no mercy. One shot to the shoulder to drop him, one to the knee. Cesare collapsed among white petals and broken glass, finally small enough to hate properly. Dante stood over him, breathing hard. Cesare laughed, blood into his teeth. "Now you know what love costs." Dante looked down at him with something colder than anger. "I learned that at 14. The last shot was not theatrical. It was final." Afterward, the house went very quiet except for the river striking pilings below the bluff. Paolo took the ledgers. Rosa sat down abruptly on a stair and started praying in Sicilian through gritted teeth. Nico leaned against the wall, clutching his side. "Am I pale?" he asked me. "Tell me if I'm pale. If I die before Rosa admits she adores me, I'll haunt this family." "You're not dying," I said, pressing my scarf to the graze at his ribs. He looked relieved and deeply offended. "Then I want soup." Across the gallery, Dante bent and picked up one fallen lily from the wreckage. Water ran down his wrist. He looked at the flower for a long time, then dropped it gently beside Cesare's hand. When he came to me, his eyes were older than they had been that morning. I reached for him without thinking. He let me. "It is over," I whispered. He held my gaze as if testing whether those words could exist in a world like his. Then he nodded once. "It is over." War leaves, dust in places cleaning cannot reach. 3 months passed, then 4. The ledgers gave the state enough names to make the newspapers ugly for weeks. Enough shell companies froze that half the men who once pretended not to know Dante suddenly remembered old loyalties. Others disappeared. A few had to be helped. The villa changed with the season. Citrus ripened in the conservatory. The fountain in the courtyard ran clear instead of looking decorative and vaguely threatening. Men still stood at the gates, armed and silent, but the silence no longer felt like a held breath, more like aftermath. I moved into the east greenhouse and called it an office because the word studio made Nico mock me. "It's a shed with emotional lighting," he said, carrying in a crate of vases and trying not to wince from his healing side. "If you become internationally famous, please remember I transported your fern phase. It's not a phase. Everything is a phase." "Mine is suffering nobly," Rosa from the doorway said. "Your phase is asking for second lunch." He clutched his chest. "And yet you know me so well." She kissed his cheek in passing without warning. He went completely still, then in a voice of holy shock whispered, "Did everyone see that, or am I dead?" I laughed so hard I had to sit down. He looked at me, dazzled and terrified. "I need a minute, possibly a priest." Somehow in the months after Blood and Fire, that ridiculous half-love had become one of the truest things in the house. Rosa still rolled her eyes at him. Nico still complained like respiration depended on it. But now she set aside the crustiest end of the bread because he liked it, and he brought her the good lemons from every supplier run without once being asked. Human life, I had learned, survives in humiliatingly small gestures, so does love. My shop was gone, but not entirely. With Dante's money, which I fought, lost, then accepted only after he let me write terms on paper, I rebuilt Bellini as a private design house attached to the Salvetor charitable wing. Laundering no money, taking no hush contracts, and producing arrangements for hospitals, chapels, and events where the flowers might actually be paid for. Mina came back the first week and stayed because, in her words, crime-adjacent healthcare benefits are still benefits. I saw Dante less than I wanted and more than was safe. Breakfast sometimes. Midnight in the library, the conservatory after rain. He would enter, stand too close to the work table, ask one precise question about a shipment or a stem choice or why I had arranged white hellebores with rosemary. As if those questions were not really about flowers at all. He had kissed me only once, 3 weeks after the river house in the greenhouse doorway, while I still smelled faintly of soil and he still smelled of dark air and gun oil and soap. Brief, careful. Enough to ruin silence forever. After that, restraint again, less accidental now, more deliberate. He would touch my wrist and stop there. Put his hand at my back and remove it before heat turned dangerous. Look at my mouth and then ask about invoices. It was making me quietly insane. On a warm evening in late spring, Rosa set dinner in the courtyard under strings of low lights and announced no men with phones were welcome at the table. Even Dante obeyed, which told me either she ran the world or he wanted to. We ate grilled fish, charred lemons, bread Nico openly worshipped, and a salad so severe he claimed it was personal. The conversation drifted from supplier delays to whether the basil had finally given up on life. For one suspended hour, the house did something radical. It felt ordinary. When the plates had been cleared and Rosa bullied Nico into helping with dessert he clearly intended to steal, Dante said, "Walk with me." No one looked surprised. That was alarming. We crossed the courtyard under the cypress shadows and stopped near the fountain. Water moved over stone. The night smelled of jasmine and the faint, clean green of the lilies opening in the greenhouse behind us. He stood with one hand in his pocket, the other holding something small I couldn't see. "I have an apartment in the city," he said. "A real one, not for meetings." I waited, "and the house in Vermont still exists." I smiled despite myself. "The Bear Kingdom." His mouth moved. Almost a smile. "Yes." Then he held out his hand. A ring sat in his palm, not an enormous diamond selected by committee. A heavy antique band of white gold with a small central stone and tiny engraved leaves along the sides. As if someone long dead had understood that beauty lasts longer when it remembers the living world. I looked at it, then at him. "This is not romance done properly," I said softly. "No, usually there's kneeling. I already did that once on church stairs and disliked the occasion." A laugh broke out of me before tears did. The tears came anyway. His gaze locked on them with the same terrible concentration it always did, as if my tears were things he would negotiate with God over if given the chance. "I don't have a clean version of this," he said. "No man like me does. I can give you honesty. I can give you my name, which is a dangerous thing to share and a more dangerous thing to carry. I can give you the truth that there will be days you hate my world and nights you hate what it asks of me." His voice lowered. "I can also give you every quiet hour I survive." My throat hurt. "Sophia Bellini," he said, and then stopped as if the rest cost more than gunfire ever had. "Stay officially with me." I looked at the ring, at the engraved leaves. At the hand holding it, the same hand I had bandaged in a sacristy, the same hand that had crushed a killer's throat in the market. The same hand that now trembled so slightly only someone who arranged petals for a living would ever notice. "You could have asked this like a king," I whispered. He met my gaze. "I wanted to ask it like a man." That finished me. I held out my left hand. He slid the ring onto my finger with care so controlled it felt reverent. "Say something," he said. I laughed wetly. "You're impossible." His thumb brushed the ring once. "Yes." I took a breath that felt like stepping over a border. "Yes." The word settled between us, warm and irreversible. He touched my cheek. "Good," he said softly. Then, warmer than I had ever heard it, "Come here, Fior." This time when he kissed me, neither of us stopped. Later, long after the courtyard emptied, and the fountain kept its own counsel in the dark, We sat at the kitchen table eating stolen dessert, while Rosa pretended not to notice, and Nico pretended not to watch his own future glowing from the stove light. It was not a fairy tale, it was better. 9 months later, the first thing I noticed was the smell: crushed lilies, sharp, green, wet in the back of my throat. I turned from the conservatory sink and found one white bloom tipped sideways on the work table. Its stem snapped where a delivery boy had stacked the buckets too fast and apologized so sincerely I couldn't even be angry. "It's my fault, Signora," he said, pale with horror. "I didn't see, it's fine." I reached for my knife. "Go unload the roses before Rosa decides apology is not enough." He fled. The morning sun poured through the glass in long, clean bands. Outside, the courtyard fountain sent up small silver sounds. Somewhere in the house, Nico was complaining theatrically about having to carry peonies, while planning his wedding to Rosa with the solemn dread of a man who has discovered happiness can also be administrative. I smiled to myself and looked down at the broken lily. Old instinct, old lesson, fresh cut, fresh water, broken things still drink if you give them a chance. I trimmed the stem clean. Behind me, the room went quiet in that particular way it only ever did for one person. I did not turn immediately. His footsteps came slow over terracotta, not because he was cautious. Because he liked to watch me work when he thought I wouldn't notice. After all this time, the weight of that attention still unsettled something tender under my ribs. "What?" I asked, keeping my eyes on the lily as I reset it in the vase. Dante stopped at my back. His reflection appeared in the glass dark suit exchanged for open collar and rolled sleeves, morning stubble at his jaw, scar catching pale light. Softer than the man from the hotel lobby. "More dangerous for it. You did it again," he said. I met his eyes in the reflection, the air between us changed. "For the flower, for the broken thing." His voice was quiet. "Before yourself." There it was, the bookend, the wound with a heartbeat. I turned then. The ring on my hand flashed once in the sun, not because I liked showing it off, though perhaps I did a little. Mostly because it reminded me that some choices become real only after surviving ordinary mornings. He came close enough to tuck one fallen strand of hair behind my ear. His fingertips lingered at my neck. The old almost had become this, no less charged, just less afraid of itself. "You're staring," I murmured. "I know, that's rude." "No," I laughed softly. The house behind us was alive now. Rosa directing staff in the kitchen. Nico arguing that seating charts were a fascist concept. Mina on the phone with a bride who thought simple meant peonies flown in from another continent. Men at the gates, accounts to settle, favors to deny, a world still dangerous, still his. Still mine because I had chosen it. I rested my hand against his chest. "You never told me what it costs you." His gaze sharpened. "What?" "To notice," I said. "Every time I do that. Every time I cut something clean instead of throwing it away, you look like it hurts." He was silent for so long I almost regretted asking. Then he took my hand and turned it palm up, tracing the faint silver line on my thumb where the thorn had cut me months ago in the greenhouse. He looked at our joined hands for a moment before answering. "It cost me the lie," he said again, quieter this time, "that I was only good at ending things." I didn't move. The lie that if I stayed cold enough, nothing living could reach me. Nothing soft, nothing breakable. His thumb brushed my ring once, the motion so slight it almost undid me. "Then I saw you in that hotel lobby. You were humiliated, crying, and you still cut the stem clean. You still tried to save what had been crushed." His gaze lifted to mine. "Since then, every time you do it, I remember there are things in this world worth tending." My throat tightened. "And that," he said, voice roughening in a way it rarely did, "is the most dangerous thing that has ever happened to me." I laughed softly through the ache in my chest. "More dangerous than Cesare Valenti?" "Yes, that feels dramatic. I married a florist. Drama entered the house legally." I smiled then helplessly and held out the small knife to him. "Then help me." He took it. His hands were still a dangerous man's hands, scarred, steady, capable of terrible efficiency. But when he bent over the broken lily, he was careful. He trimmed the split stem on a clean angle just the way my father had taught me, just the way his mother had taught him. Then he passed it back. I set it in fresh water. The lily settled among the others as if it had always belonged there. The sharp green scent rose between us, but it did not smell like humiliation anymore. It did not smell like marble floors and rich people looking through me. It smelled like morning, like glass warmed by sunlight, like a life chosen with open eyes. From the kitchen, Nico's voice carried through the house in full despair. "Rosa, if we seat your cousin beside my uncle, there will be blood at the wedding." Rosa answered without missing a beat. "Then use the good tablecloths." Dante's mouth tipped at one corner. I touched the front of his shirt right over his heart. "Do you ever wish I had taken the Vermont house?" His eyes stayed on mine. "Never, not even once, not even when you argue with me." "That's love," I said. "That's evidence." I laughed, and he bent to kiss my forehead first, then my mouth, slow and warm and entirely unafraid of being seen. When he pulled back, his hand stayed at the back of my neck. "Command," he murmured, and the word that followed was no longer a lock, no longer a warning, no longer a wound trying not to bleed. It was home. Fior. I went with him. And if there was still a shadow in loving a man like Dante Salvator, it was this. I never fully learned whether love changes darkness, or simply teaches it how to be gentle with what it cannot bear to lose. Would you have chosen Dante and accepted everything his world had already cost?